negotiations. So on the left part of the agenda, it was 5 parties, but only 4 of them were allowed to play on the soccer field, and only 2 of them were in power that had posts of like ministers and high, yeah, everything high was only of 2 of the 5. And now the fifth wheel did get angry over regulations of flats, how you can rent them and the price you can set for a new built flat. And that actually made everything go kaboom.
Mm.
So this is so it actually organized one of the 3 things that Tyler brought up last week, that these are the 3 things that we need to fix to make this to make a better growth of startups and countries in general. Housing is the third point you brought up, and that was destroyed, or rather, put a reset button on the government in Sweden.
It's so ironic because as a newcomer to Stockholm, who, you know, uh, I'm not, despite what others might tell you, I'm not exactly an idiot, and kind of know how to function and get through life unscathed. Arriving in Stockholm, I was just really confused. Like, I thought I was losing my mind about how difficult it was to find an apartment to rent. I mean, it's just truly puzzlingly, bizarrely impossible to find an apartment to rent. And even if you do, it's only for 2 or 3 months while someone else is on some long vacation somewhere. And then they come back, and then and this happens a lot. People are moving every 3 months and to trying to find a stable place to live. And if they do find a place that they could stay for a year, they'll happily take something well below their means just for the stability of maintaining one location, not having to move repeatedly, which starts to become a real pain in the ass. And I thought, this is just not sustainable. It's just is. I mean, I was living in, at one point, a student housing with a bunch of students, which, by the way, wasn't so bad, actually. And then I went from that straight to an old folks community full of 80-year-old people, which also was not so bad, actually. And I even had, one time I had a friend come pick me up in his car, and I said where I was, and he pulls up to the front. He's like, "Who are you visiting here?" I'm like, "No, I live here." He's like, "What?" He goes, "You know what this is?" I said, "Why? What do you think it is?" He goes, "It's an old folks housing." I said, "Yeah, well, that explains why all my neighbors are 80 years old, I guess." And and then I lived in hotels for months, and everything, every scenario you can imagine, and that's how impossible it is to get an apartment there. So in part, it's, I don't want to say that it's karma. I wish no ill will on Sweden at all, but it's like whatever it takes to get that issue resolved is long overdue.
There are people that claims it's easier to get a flat in Hong Kong
Oh,
than
I
Stockholm.
don't doubt. It might be easier to get one on the fucking International Space Station. Um, get a bunk up there. Get a bunk on the moon. Get a trip to Mars. But yeah, well, there are fortunately other cities where, now that people don't have to work in any given particular place, we all got the freedom and luxury. We can get a goddamn van and put a Starlink on the ceiling and drive, for 7 days deep into the Amazon rainforest and do our Skype calls and Clubhouse meetings from there. Welcome to the future, everybody. We call it Tech News Around the World.
What's Gothenburg like?
Uh,
Sorry, I was gonna ask you, Tyler. What's Gothenburg like? Is it a second city for startups in Sweden?
No, and they constantly begrudge, not so much as Malmo does. Malmo's still a little bit bitter that Stockholm kind of exploded. And it's Malmo slightly suffers from the fact that they are literally across the bridge from Copenhagen, and Copenhagen becomes sort of the gravity of the startup ecosystem in that, right there. So the citizens of Malmo are kind of, in a weird way, more part of the Danish ecosystem than the Swedish ecosystem. And then back to your question about Gothenburg, is they have a really good technical university, Chalmers, which I believe Johan went to yourself. Did you not, Johan? one of Sweden's leading tech universities for sure. The problem is as soon as they graduate, they kind of make a beeline straight for Stockholm because that's where the money is and the jobs are and the opportunities and the ecosystem that we developed very consciously. And the people who are in Gothenburg have been Swedes are they're not so great at the community building function. So it's not a coincidence that myself came and this is often discussed of like it took an American to come and kind of bring the Swedes together and function as a community in Stockholm as we have as a startup ecosystem. And also the other event organizers who organize the other tech events are, there's only a handful of tech Americans in Stockholm, and then they all happen to be event organizers. A lot of them, a lot of the top of tech events are organized by Americans and non-Swedes. And to that point, the big annual conference that I do, my whole team, of which I have a kind of a hardcore team of about 10 people, you met one of them here last month, Gobenya, who's from Nigeria, works at Google. And then I've got other team members that are a Ukrainian, someone from Lebanon. It's out of the 10 members, only one of them is a quote unquote traditional Swede. Just to highlight the point of like the community spirit is being driven in part by kind of, as is common in Silicon Valley, the kind of first generation immigrants. And there's something about the first generation immigrants wherever they are, Silicon Valley, Stockholm, whatever, where they and it's, by the way, Sebastian from Klarna, which is now Sweden's second biggest startup, at now a $45 billion valuation due to their new fundraising last week. Sebastian, along with Mark Zuckerberg and Tim, remember my friends in Paris did their big event last week called Vivatech, where they had Tim Cook, Apple CEO Tim Cook, they had Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. They also had Klarna's CEO Sebastian, who you've heard me rave about it because he's a fundamental supporter of my events. And Sebastian got on stage and watch. I'll try and I think you can find the video online. If somebody can, I'll retweet it from the Twitter account so everyone can see it. And the first thing he talks about is he was first generation immigrant from Poland. His parent, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Even when you look at the unicorn founders of Stockholm, of which we have about 16 or 17 now, they're disproportionately first generation immigrants, just like Silicon Valley. So it's an interesting dynamic.
One of the fun things with Sebastian that he's really, really active in the social media. He actually goes in and asks questions in the e-commerce parts of Facebook, where we are quite a few that hangs around there. And the first time he actually posted something there, somebody just drew the card and said, "Oh, you have a communicator to have landed his account." But no, hell, it's me. So he actually sent one of these Reddit page about, "This is me. We're talking to e-commerce Sweden, Sebastian," with a shot with him in front of his desk in his office. So yeah, it was him.
Yeah, there's a beautiful down-to-earthness about the Swedish geeks, where we don't let ourselves get too big of a head and try and keep it real. And Sebastian's is real. And anyway, let's jump into headlines from around the world, as we are notorious for doing. And there's some breaking news happening as we speak. Before I get into my lengthy stack, as usual, people are sending all kinds of tweets into our Twitter account at TNATW by finding fantastic tech articles and headlines and tweeting them out from their accounts. They include us as part of their tweet so that we see it, which is TNATW, short for Tech News Around the World. I retweet the best ones. We discuss them here. And while we discuss them, other people in the audience are finding additional related headlines and tweeting those out. And it keeps the game going for at least a few hours. And let's do it. So if anyone on stage is burning with a headline, popcorn style, have at it.
Oh, did you see the petition for
I
Jeff
did,
Bezos
Harry,
to stay in
and a bunch of people are tweeting that one at the moment. That there's a signature collection now that Jeff Bezos is going up into space on his own rocket with his brother, no less, and the whoever won the auction to sit next to them. Does someone remember the final price of that? Something crazy like
28
that.
million.
That now that he's going up into space, there's a large signature collection to refuse him entry back to Earth. I don't know that there's much more to the story than that. It's just, yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Guess who's come back?
56,000
Guess who's come back down to earth? Is
Oh, is it?
David.
Holy
He
cow!
just
Welcome
joined
back,
us.
David
I can't
Chang.
believe
Welcome
it.
back to.
Oh man,
Hi
I'm so glad
there.
to see you.
Hi,
Hi,
David.
You're
boys.
still safe. You're
Oh, we
safe. You're
miss
alive.
you, David.
Did you have a nice cup of tea, David?
A whole tub of tea. I just got to the US and I've just been vaccinated, so wanted
Yay.
to come and say hi to
Yeah.
everyone.
We have so much to catch
The
up,
mainstream
David.
media is. I guess we can't say what David's been DMing Cal and I, but David's been busy. And
All I can say is that
He
Jim
was
Cramer
playing
is
chess
just
with
catching
doing some
up.
finger painting with Jack Ma.
Yeah, exactly. Jim Cramer's just catching up.
Yep. So, David.
Did
Monica,
you guys?
welcome.
I
What's
have
going on
some
in
news.
India?
Yeah. I have some breaking news, and it's actually not such great news for Jeff
Okay.
Bezos, who may not want to come back from
Okay.
space, at least not to India. But the government has proposed a lot of changes for e-commerce firms in India under pressure from trade and government bodies. Specifically, that e-commerce platforms such as Amazon and Flipkart cannot offer flash sales of any goods or services. E-tailers must appoint grievance officers and chief compliance officers. I hope that sounds familiar to you. Tighter rules for private brands that have the name of the associated e-commerce platform. Amazon Basics, anyone? Companies selling imported goods should name the country of origin. This is because Amazon has flouted and violated rules where they have not mentioned made in China brands. And stakeholders can send feedback on proposed amendments by July 6th. So this is in direct response of a lot of lobbying, specifically by merchant associations within the country, opposing both Amazon and Flipkart flouting FDI rules, specifically with their own party brands, which they call, provide the inventory for. It's called Amazon Basics in India, and then there is e-tail by Flipkart, which actually sells more than 50 to 60% of all merchandise on these online stores. So this is huge breaking news, and unfortunately not such great news for
Yeah.
Amazon or Flipkart.
Well, there's other really negative news about Amazon at the moment that I just tweeted out, which is that apparently there's an investigation that finds that Amazon has been destroying thousands of unsold goods at its UK-based warehouse, sources say, and they have the video receipts to prove it. Sources say 130,000 items destroyed each week. And this is ITV is claiming an exclusive on this, that an employee got this video footage. Thank you to Mike Butcher from TechCrunch, a personal old friend, who shared it. And I just shared that out to our Twitter account at TNATW, short for Tech News Around the World. And I have to assume if it's happening in one location that this is sort of a secret policy potentially. And hey, tech journalists, here's a wild story to dig on. Is Amazon intentionally destroy?
Tyler, just quickly, can you unpack the India situation on Amazon and the effects of Flipkart and the inbuilt issues around Twitter
let's let
and
Monica
all
do that,
if possible.
Hey, let me just add to everybody, today is Amazon Prime Day, just so you know. This is on the hooves of the
Well, it
biggest
also
day
happens to be
Exactly.
midsummer, which is the most important day in Scandinavia, due to the fact that it's the longest, it's the solstice, summer solstice, which is the longest day of the year, which doesn't sound so important until you live in a part of the world that doesn't have any sun for half the year, and then it becomes incredibly important. And so glad midsummer to all of my Scandinavian friends. It is the...
And it's also, and it's also National Indigenous Day. in Canada.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, people north
We're celebrating the solstice as well.
Canadians maybe are more sensitive to the daylight element, but yeah, Scandinavians, midsummer is the peak celebration of the year, and
what I find quite intriguing about this is the importance of the day of Amazon, the Flipkart IPO, and everything going on, and then this coming out right around the Twitter issues and everything. Monica, can you assist a little bit on this and provide just a little bit of an explanation for the
Sure.
likes of me, please?
So for us, this has been going on for the past 3 years. CAIT, which is Confederation of All India Traders Association, is a huge body which actually comprises of all the main mom and pop stores as well as other traders who typically do business in the offline environment. Ever since Amazon and Flipkart set up business in India, they have been opposing the setup of not only foreign marketplaces but the huge discounting that happens. They have been not only signing petitions, but they have been actually going to the Supreme Court of India asking for these marketplaces to be banned because they create unfair competition which offline traders are not able to compete with. Having said that, the traders bodies have also actually created their own unions, and unions are very popular in our sides of the world, but whereby they have actually tried to create online marketplaces for these particular traders and merchants. Now, as far as Amazon and Flipkart are concerned, the biggest problems that have been cited with them, which the government has warned them about earlier, has been the huge discounting practices, specifically with smartphones which were sold in flash sales, which actually created this whole discounting regime, which has made offline retailers go out of business. And second is the ability for them to sell their own brands under the brand of a third-party seller, which is actually themselves as a separate entity. So, for example, Amazon has Amazon Basics, and it actually does a lot of their own inventory management through a separate company. And Flipkart has eCart, which also does the same thing. So, essentially, what this means is that merchants on the platform, which is sellers on the platform, do not get the same are not at the same parity as local competition should be when they are competing with the likes of a billion-dollar organization, which these companies are. Further to that, there was also FDI rules, which is foreign direct investment rules, that were being flouted. Shareholding to less, I'm forgetting the exact number, which I'll have to look up, but this happened in 2018, where they would have to reduce their shareholding, and that there would be a competition body in India which would be subjecting them to regulation. Now, after all this, in the last 2 months, there has been a serious amount of effort on the government side associated with regulating e-commerce, and there are associations, and this is again a very, very South Asian problem to have, but there are many parts of the government which want to actually regulate but also be responsible for the competition monopoly as well as the regulation of e-commerce in general, but they haven't been able to pinpoint and find one administrative wing behind it. In between of all this, the CAIT team, and I know that there are lobbyists behind it because there are other lobbyists who work with them in order to promote Indian MSMEs, etc. They went to the Supreme Court, and now the e-commerce guidelines that have been released by the government of India simply says that the Department of Trade and Commerce will ensure that the e-commerce companies fall in line, and they are supposed to comply with the rules and regulations without flouting. The serious violations that have been told to them have not been taken into account, which is why they need to have a grievance officer and a chief compliance officer stationed within the country. Again, just for noting, Amazon does have a huge Indian ecosystem and a huge development center built out of 2 main cities in India, in southern India, which is Bangalore and Chennai. They have spent more than about $6 billion on just India. However, the compliance officers is become a major need of the Indian government, and that is still not being satisfied, and the government has asked for them to do that. Also, most importantly, revised rules require e-com companies to share information with the government within 72 hours of receipt of the order. I hope that this reminds you of the similar mandate.
Yes.
Right?
So
and last, sorry, go ahead.
So sorry, just a quick one because I don't want to take up too much time on the stage, Monica. I don't know if you were here the day that another friend, and I'm not going to name him, and if you're not comfortable answering this question, please don't, because I do know that certain governments are conducting certain favors to individuals that are commenting openly on this platform. So please do care for that. But this sounds very familiar, and I know the company that it sounds familiar to. Another good friend of ours on this stage was commenting, and we'd come up with a nice thesis that sounded like the government is very keen on the fact that they wish, I won't say fact, but it looks like the government is very keen to put these certain legislations in place or put these orders in place that are going to, in the long run, put these Western players in a position where they need to essentially get forced out of the ecosystem because they've got these large giants that they have the ability to create themselves. The economy is creating some of the largest giants in the world, and hats off to India for doing that. They have the power to do this themselves. They have the power to create some of the world's biggest giants themselves. The talent is on the ground. And the government seems to be coming up with policies that it's better to do it ourselves. And so this looks like it's a policy across the board for the political
You
agenda.
cynical bastard. How dare you?
So if you're not comfortable answering the question, don't answer it. But
don't, Monica, as your lawyer, Monica,
Tyler,
as your lawyer.
You were in the room when we did this. You were in the room when me and the other friend did this as a thesis.
Yeah, I've been saying this.
Yeah, but it's a question to the room. So
I'll even take credit for creating this thesis. I think this is exactly what everybody's doing, and it circles back to when the room opened, 20 minutes ago when I said that when you have long lunches in Europe, as they are renowned for doing with politicians, they often start waxing on, why don't we have our own Apples and Amazons and Googles? And what could we do to maybe make some different policies? The problem is I don't know if they're just too soft-hearted or whatever, and then you go to other countries where they're like, no, fuck this. And China, most notably, was like, no, Google, we got this, thank you. We're going to make our own Google. And Russia has Yandex. And some countries are just much more, competitive and understand as I think China didn't necessarily do it in part for the economic reasons of having their own tech giants and dragons, as they now do, that have also gotten so big that they need to be regulated and have gotten too powerful. But this whole point now, and we're seeing it with Twitter in India, where Twitter is being told that quietly to get the F out. Interesting political maneuvering that's happening with Twitter in India at the moment, also in Nigeria, and countries are realizing, in part for the control of the communication. In the case of social networks, we could argue perhaps that countries don't like Twitter and Facebook and or YouTube because when there are things being said on those platforms that they don't like, they want to silence it. And we see these headlines all the time where Big Daddy Vladdy in the Kremlin's telling Google they'd take down these YouTube videos that hurt his feelings. And then...
no, but this country is different,
India.
Tyler. This country is different.
India, you mean? Yeah, well, yeah, India. We've been talking about it every day for 3 weeks now. But at the end of the day, the way that they're handling Twitter is really interesting to analyze because it started off in the exact same way as it does in Russia, essentially, which is take down these tweets. And Twitter plays dumb and is like, oh, we'll get around to it sometime. And they're like, no, you got to take them down now. And it's this cat and mouse game. It's like like the bad child and the parent. And then eventually India's like, okay, enough of this nonsense. You need to have somebody on the ground geographically that we can slap around if need be physically. And so Twitter realized, that might not be so good. So we'll hire an attorney to be our representative. And India says, no. We told you very specifically, it needs to be an actual employee of your company, not a hired third party like an attorney. And yet again, you're stalling, get your shit together, or you're going to lose your kind of protection as a platform, which, affords you in America, what's called Section 230 in the Safe Harbor Clause. Platforms are not responsible for what's said on their platforms. Well, thank God, because there's a lot of stupid YouTube comments. I don't know if you've noticed this. But stupid people are abound on the internet, and they say stupid things at an incredible rate. So Twitter, when India just recently, I don't know, 48 hours ago, 72 hours ago, told Twitter, okay, well, you've been playing this game too long. We're now as we told you we would, removing your safe protection, and you are now responsible for what gets said on your platform. And my God, what could possibly go wrong in a country of 1 billion people with a government who watches every tweet very closely? And sure enough, not even 10 minutes went by and somebody said something on Twitter that forced the police to drag the managing director of Twitter India into the police station to make a personal statement, which means don't go anywhere because we might need to put you behind these very secure bars. And that's where it is today. And in analyzing that very peculiar situation, one must theorize or sort of conjecturize that essentially what India is doing is forcing Twitter into a very difficult situation indeed, where the only safe situation is to remove itself. So it wasn't that India kicked Twitter out. It was that Twitter was sort of forced to remove itself for fear of having its staff incarcerated, etc., because they lost the important thing that makes it possible for them to exist. And this is where it gets back to Faraz's point. Super interestingly, an internal domestic competitor was born. What a wild coincidence, which, so amazingly plays very friendly with the government. All of the government's friends are on the app, and the government itself is on the app. How interesting that it just got a shit ton of funding on the exact same day that India's, had sent 6 or 7 gentlemen in uniforms down to Twitter's headquarters to kind of rough them up over why they had